if it were a different manager, a different team, then I could say yes. So, for example, if it was like Roy Hodgson and he was changing from Johnston to somebody else, I'd be like, yeah, he's done now. Johnston, sit on the bench for a while. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Media Derby. How you doing, Ant?
Good, mate. I'm good. My team's but I'm all right. How are you, man?
Yeah, I thought you might not be feeling too great about the football side of things, but I obviously you had a nice little holiday, so I hope that was good. For me, I'm feeling all right. Again, not a scintillating performance. So on the football side of things, I'm not over the moon, but yeah, just happy to see 3 points, which aren't coming too easy for us at the moment. So,
Nah, man. It's
anyway,
tough out here.
yeah, it is football's a humbler, as they say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so today we've got a pretty good show, kind of lined up here. We've obviously got some interesting results to talk through. Obviously, Arsenal played Everton away. Man United played Brighton at home. So we're going to go through those today, as well as looking a little bit forward to some of the interesting things that are going to be happening this week. One of which, obviously, being Champions League football. It's finally back. I'm looking forward to hearing the beautiful introduction music to the Champions League. And then we'll have a little look at kind of the games coming up next week as well. And there's a big one coming up for us on the North London side of things. But let's get into it, Ant. So we'll start with Arsenal because obviously we'll start maybe with a happier note before we get into what I'm sure is going to become a rattling day for you. So Arsenal 1-0 away to Everton, our major bogey team. It's not a result that we typically get. I can't remember the exact record, but we haven't won against Everton for a decently long amount of time, which is always frustrating for us. Did you watch the match, and what did you think of the result in general?
Yeah. So I think the record is you haven't won there in the last five,
There
of
you go.
which you've lost four. So that's pretty poor. Um, and I think if you break it out to like Merseyside or Liverpool as a whole, that record's even harder. Or
Yeah.
harder viewing, I would say. But I mean, the Liverpool side of things is kind of expected. Going to Anfield's always hard, but you'd expect to pick up some results at Goodison Park, especially considering how poor they've been in the last 3 or 4 seasons. But yeah, you turned it around, and I think it was a decent performance. I don't think it was anything special, like you mentioned, kind of in your intro. I think you kind of just got the job done. And at grounds where you have a bit of a hoodoo, like Selhurst Park, like Burnley, Turf Moor, and stuff like that, where you guys have struggled before, you kind of just need to get out there alive and get a result. The performance isn't too important. And you knew Everton were going to play like a low block, absolute shithouse football. So, it was always going to be difficult. It was going to be polar opposites. And I think you guys did well. I think I was pleasantly surprised to see some of the changes Arteta made. So bringing in Fabio Vieira, dropping Havertz, bringing in obviously Raya for Ramsdale, and then I think it was good to see your back four as well look like somewhat similar to last season. I think pretty much since the United game, he's stopped faffing about with the lineup too much when it comes to your back line, and you've looked a lot more sturdy, and I don't think some of the misunderstandings have happened. I feel like your back four have looked really, really stable. So I think it was a decent performance, man. I think the only kind of negative to come from it is obviously Martinelli coming off and not knowing, I think, how badly the injury is, or what kind of injury he's managed to get, because obviously he scored the disallowed goal and he looked quite lively before he got taken off. So I think that's probably the only minor negative from the game. But what did you take of what did you make? Sorry, of the match, and Have you got any players you want to call out as best performers, or did anyone kind of maybe on the other side of things kind of fail to live up to expectations, or what's your summary of the game?
Well, I mean, I think I'll start with the kind of team selection. And just as you said, it was nicer to see, particularly in the back line, that defence in a more familiar fashion than we've seen it in the last few weeks. Obviously, I mean, I was still checking like the live score lineups, and I did see that like Gabriel was playing right back, but I'm not sure if they just got that wrong or what happened, because in the game it didn't necessarily feel like he was always playing out wide. So obviously that's just because of how fluid we are in attack versus defense and how the formation kind of changes. But as you said, it was not just nice to see kind of a more settled back line and not see a bunch of players playing massively out of position. So that was the first thing. I think bringing in Fabio Vieira for Havertz was good as well. Fabio Vieira was one of the players in that game that I thought was pretty exciting. Did have a couple of chances that I think he should have done better on, but for the most part was creative, quick on the ball, kind of all the same things that we were talking about before about being really kind of agile, very Bruno Silva like, right? Like he's got that agility to him. He kind of slaloms through certain players. Obviously, nowhere near as good as Bruno Silva, who had an amazing week. But I think generally speaking, it was nice to see him on the pitch and see him a bit lively, playing a bit more lively in comparison to how Havertz plays, which is kind of a little bit, lackluster. Even though I know that's kind of his style, it doesn't give off the right vibes for me. So I think it was nice to see Fabio Vieira, and maybe they figured out how to play him and Odegaard together, because both of them had a really good game for us. And as you said, obviously, the saddest thing about that game was seeing Martinelli come off within 5 minutes of kind of scoring that disallowed goal. And I've kind of read some of the reports. It seems like it's not a super serious injury, but it also doesn't seem like it's going to be a real short, he's going to be back next week or he's going to be back next game kind of injury. I feel like he's going to be out for a couple of weeks now. They did say it's something to do with like a tendon injury, but they didn't say that it was like an ACL or an MCL or something like that. So I'm hoping that it's going to be not too bad. The max I'd take is like a month out, because I really do think that he's critical to the way we played. Obviously, last week I went on a bit of a rant about how he's underrated, and I still feel that way about him. He was still really, really good. Generally speaking, the match, though, we deserved to win, but at the same time, like 1-0, 2-0 would have been a max of what we would have deserved from that match. We didn't light the world on fire. We weren't clinical again. We didn't create a crazy number of chances. We did create some good ones, but nothing like, no crazy domination of that game. Everton just look bloody impotent, man. They can't finish their dinner. And I hate to say this because I like Beto and I think he's going to be good for them, but they can't provide for any of these players. And their probably best chance that they got was Decore trying to run through and then dive into Saliba's body to try and win a penalty. And that was about as good as it got. And that really summed up the game from them. It was like, maybe they could have created something, but they just didn't have the nous at the end of it to actually do anything with any of the chances they got. So from that perspective, Everton, you lot stink, and you really deserve to go down based off of that performance. In terms of best performers, worst performers, I think worst performers, I know this sounds really biased, but I don't think anyone stood out as being really stinky. I'll be honest with you. I think it might sound a bit controversial, but Trossard, apart from the absolutely beautiful finish that he put in, was being really wasteful in our own half, which really annoys me. He did it on the back end of last season, where they were like, we were trying to break off of them, and he got a bit too, ahead of himself. It's in a time where we're winning the match. Doesn't need to be doing that, and he gives the ball away stupidly to the opposition, and then it ends up getting into a goal or something like that. So outside of his beautiful finish, some of his passes he was putting in our half were not making me very happy, and I was getting, I was punching pillows and all kinds of stuff. So for that point of view, maybe him, but I feel like that's so harsh based off of how good that finish was. So I'm going to leave him out of it and just say no one. For best performers, I think Odegaard was classy as always, very Rolls Royce like, just very, didn't make a lot of mistakes, was really in the game. Obviously, it's not Man City, it's Everton, so it's probably easier for him to get into the game, but he was good. Rice, again, was, as always, again, a very kind of a solid 7, solid 8 kind of player, and I feel like that's what we're going to be getting from him a lot in this season. And then I want to give like a special mention to Fabio Vieira, because I went in on him pretty hard last season. Said he was super lightweight and afraid looking of playing the ball, but he played against Everton, who, as you said, could be, arguably the biggest houses in the league, and he held his own. So can't fault him too much for that. That's kind of how I'd probably sum up the game. Nothing to light the world on fire, but as you said, just nick them 3 points and get the hell out of Goodison Park, man.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with your special call out for Fabio Vieira, because I think I was joining in with you last season saying he was very, very lightweight and flimsy, and it was a big question mark whether he would be able to cut it in the Prem. And I think even from the sub appearances that he'd had earlier in the season, he looked like he was bringing something else to his performances. He looked way more dynamic. He looked like, I'm not saying he's now looking like more of a man who's able to handle the Prem, because I still think he's quite slight, but it looks like he's developing a style and a way and an approach that you mentioned. You kind of combined Bruno and Bernardo Silva together earlier
Oh
when you
yes,
mentioned him. You
I was
called him
thinking Bruno Silva
Silva.
don't sound right to me. Yeah, Bernardo
Yeah.
Silva. Apologies, man's getting
But
his Silvas and
he's
Fernandez's
quite,
mixed up. Yeah.
his style is quite similar to that, and I think he's hasn't quite, I think, developed all the nous and some of the kind of like game intelligence that maybe Bernardo has. And I think, we're talking about a player who's probably knocking on the door of world class, if not already world class. So that's fair enough for someone who's kicking off their second campaign in the Prem. But he looked good, man, and I agree with you. The finishing, he's still got to fine tune that, and he looked like he could definitely. Someone with a bit more experience would have maybe taken one of the chances he got, but I thought he did well, man. I think he was probably your standout performer, but there were like the rest of your team dropped sevens, 6.5s. Like no one was below an average, and I think the majority of your players were just above average, and that's good enough to beat. To be honest, a really poor team, and I'm not going to rant on them again after last week. But yeah, they're just rubbish. We don't need to talk about Everton too much more. They're just living off the hype of the Goodison crowd and stuff like that. But even them, like, God bless them. How do they get up from watching that absolute every week? I don't know. I can see how they would just lose the will to live and not be able to support that team, because, like you said, they don't create chances. Even if they did, I have no faith that any of their forward line can put them away. And what you'd expect from a Sean Dyche team in defence, they just don't have. So it was a surprise that you actually didn't score more goals, but I think you just weren't at quite the levels to maybe put them away clinically. But still, a very good result. So let's talk through a couple of, because there's a couple of big talking points around the game, as well as obviously to do with the performance. The first one being Arteta's decision to drop Aaron Ramsdale for David Raya, and kind of some of the comments he made around last season contemplating swapping the goalie out mid-game to try and affect a change in the performance. First of all, what's your take on the Ramsdale for Raya swap? And do you now think Raya will be your number one? And then, what's also your opinion on some of the comments? Because I found them a bit weird, the Arteta ones, to be honest, around the swapping goalie mid-game. Kind of makes it seem, or he's hinting that he was kind of unhappy with maybe some of Ramsdale's performances last season, but didn't have the balls to maybe make the decision. Or how did you take it?
So, I mean, first of all, I think his comments obviously are going to come across as weird, because it's well known in football today that that's not something you do with goalkeepers, right? You can do it with any other position on the pitch. You can't do that with goalkeepers unless it's coming up to a penalty shootout, right? That's the only time we've ever really seen goalkeepers get subbed off, when it's not an injury. So obviously, from that perspective, you're talking about what we're going to call a very traditional league, right? We've had this discussion about some of the new rules they're bringing in. No one in this league likes change, right? And so when you get, again, a manager who is kind of perceived by the media to be like a mini Pep, in the fact that he's trying to do a lot of these tinkery type changes that Pep has become known for over the last however many years, obviously it's going to come across to the media and to influencers as being really, really weird. And I mean, I was watching, a well-known podcast earlier ran by a goalkeeper or a former professional goalkeeper, and they were talking about, oh, they hate it. It's horrible to see. It's terrible for confidence. It's terrible for this. It's terrible for that. And I feel like we're all kind of overdoing it a little bit. And I think it's firstly because of the fact that Ramsdale is an English goalkeeper, and because for the most part, even our opposition fans don't hate him. Obviously Tottenham fans do, and they gave him a swift kicking last season. But for the most part, people like him. He's like a decent guy. He's been pretty candid about how when he came to the club, everyone was kind of being a bit harsh to him and so on and so forth. So that doesn't add to the fact that it doesn't make it easier to swallow what Arteta's trying to do. Had he done that with like Matt Turner and Raya, no one would care. They'd be like, it's a bit weird, but yeah, kind of do what you got to do. But the fact that it's Aaron Ramsdale, he's kind of been like that underdog story where we bought him from a team that was terrible. Everyone expected him to be terrible, and he came in and kind of worked his way into it and got a lot of the fans and a lot of the pundits on his side. So because of that, it's to the point now where most people probably agree that he should be England's number one. So all of that stuff makes it a lot more difficult to swallow, and it just highlights or gives a lot of these pundits and journalists a lot more kind of motivation to talk about it and to say it's weird and to kind of essentially just condemn the idea of it in general. And so I think for me, the jury's out. I don't mind the idea of playing two different goalkeepers every now and then. I do disagree with the idea of changing goalkeepers in the middle of a match, just because I think it's like hooking someone after you've put them on as a sub. It's kind of like that Abui type thing where you bring him on in the 23rd minute and take him off in the 45th. It's horrible for morale. But I don't disagree with the fact that you can start Raya when you feel like it fits the game better. As much as we want to say like Raya and Ramsdale are similar players, they're not exactly the same. I think Ramsdale's quite clearly, in my mind, a slightly different kind of goalkeeper. First of all, in his stature. Second of all, in the type of distribution that he has. In terms of what he's got in his locker when it comes to distribution, I think he's really good with his arms, pretty good at kicking out of his hands. But I feel like Raya offers something different in terms of dribbling, in terms of being able to push up the pitch a little bit, that confidence, kicking the ball straight off the ground. I like that part of him. So from that point of view, I'm happy to see Raya come in when Arteta believes it's suitable for the style that we want to play or the formation that we want to play. So from that point of view, I'm not too bothered. Now, in terms of Ramsdale and how I feel about him, I do think it's going to be a kick in the face or kick in the teeth for him, not because of what Arteta's done, but because of what the media are saying about it now, right? And we've seen the media makes things 10 times worse. They amplify all of the negative effects of some of these kinds of things to the point where I think he's probably going to be reading some of that and think, oh, crap, I've lost my place now, where maybe Arteta's already told him, actually, this is how things are going to be. You're going to play these games and not play these games, that kind of stuff. So I think it will actually hurt Ramsdale in the long term. And I think it's going to be the making or breaking of him. If he can deal with this properly and not let his performances drop, I think we're all good. If you start to see some clangers, because he does have a bozo gene in him every now and then, I do think it could be the end of Ramsdale, and it could be just Raya's going to come in and be our number one. So I think the jury's out. It's out for now, but it's all going to depend on Ramsdale's mental and how he can deal with not being number one goalkeeper for every single match. So that's kind of how I see it. Long-winded response. Yeah.
No. I get you, man. I think it's very diplomatic response of you. But I agree with the sentiment. But I just think, like, ultimately, Arsenal are going to be the winner, right? So if Ramsdale bounces back and gets his place back, that would surely signify that his levels have gone up and the competition has worked, and he's proven to be a better goalie than David Raya. If Raya keeps him out now and performs at a high enough level, and stylistically it makes more sense for Arteta going forward, then Arsenal also win. So in terms of Arsenal, I think this is a lose-lose, because I don't believe the hype in that this can cause major instability and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it could cause one of them to get pissed off, sure, and maybe asked to leave, sure. And sure, it might hurt the England national team because you wouldn't have a second goalie behind Pickford who's playing for one of the big six teams in Champions League and all that kind of stuff. And it might be slightly harsh and upset one of the two goalies. But this was always going to be the scenario. This was inevitable as soon as you signed Raya. This was always going to happen. There's no way Arteta can keep them both happy because they both want to be number ones and play all the games. So there was either going to have to be a compromise or one of them was going to lose out. And I think, like you said, our great British media obviously going to prefer Ramsdale wins the battle and then, carries on to be the number one and Raya proves to be the number two or ends up, leaving at the end of the loan at the end of the season. But this is not that's not the reality. I understand what you're saying. The only slight disagreements I think I'll have with you is around innovation around football. You're right. Like, we don't like change, but there's some things that have been tested before. We've seen other managers try to have goalies for different cups and spread the kind of the load across a couple of goalies, and pretty much it's never worked. And I think there's too much proof and evidence that it wouldn't work to do it that way. And goalies are like a very unique, strange crop of people, and the position is very unique. So I think there's reasons why it hasn't worked before. There's reasons why, like you said, and I agree with you, pulling a goalie in the middle of a match would be bonkers. Not only for the goalie who's coming off, losing confidence, but also the goalie coming on. Because you put him in the thick of it, he's not warm. He hasn't caught his eye. He hasn't got his eye in. You're kind of weakening yourself in that position. So I think some of the comments are weird. I think he's just trying to justify his decision, which is fair enough. My manager's been talking up his ass recently, so I'm not one to point fingers when I can point them back at myself. But it's just an inevitable situation. He's going to piss off one side, and I think I do agree with some people who've said this is probably the plan all along, to find a time to bring Raya in, and he's the real guy that he wants to be number one. Because stylistically, I can see that.
But here's better. My response to that, and here's maybe a silver lining for Ramsdale is he didn't have a clanger and then get switched out. I feel like that would be different. If he had a bunch of clangers, like some De Gea type, he did something wrong, and then he got switched out, I can see him thinking, okay, I've lost my spot now because I'm obviously not good enough. And that's where I feel like there's maybe a silver lining for him, that it's a stylistic thing and it's not necessarily a choice based off of him not being good enough. You know what I mean? Because the game before this against Man United, he didn't have a clanger. He was actually pretty decent for the most part, right? And so from that point of view, I can kind of see maybe that keeps him feeling a little bit better, that maybe he's going to get back in because it might just be a stylistic choice. And so from that perspective, I feel like that gives me a little bit more maybe confidence also that he's not, because I don't want to see the end of Ramsdale. I'll be honest with you. I also have some bias that he did really well for us last season, and I want to be able to see him in the team. I've watched all these documentaries now with him in them, and he seems like a really level-headed, kind of down-to-earth guy, and he's got a bit about him that makes him what I want to see in a goalkeeper for Arsenal, gives us a bit more kind of grittiness. So I think from that perspective, I think he can look at it and think, okay, maybe it is just a stylistic choice, and I will get my chances to get back in certain other games. So I don't know what's been discussed between the two of them. I do think, obviously, the idea of having multiple goalkeepers to this day has not really worked, right? Obviously, as you said, we've had quite a lot of evidence to say it hasn't worked. At the same time, a lot of the things that Pep did, we've seen a lot of evidence that they shouldn't work or haven't worked when other managers have tried them. So I've still got a little bit of hope that maybe Arteta's got, he's just got the sauce. He's got the Pep sauce where he can make something work that hasn't worked for anyone else. But as you said, he does have a lot of these weird shouts that I disagree with. So it could as easily work out as it could go absolutely tits up. And we could see the back of Ramsdale, which I would hate to see, because I would imagine he's probably going to go to another English club, which means he's going to go to a club that probably competes with us. So I'm praying that it's just, that Arteta is going to be a genius in this case and not be an absolute end. But I guess we'll have to wait a few more weeks to see.
Johns. There's no up. This is my point. Like, it is sure it would go left if you're a big Ramsdale fan, or it would definitely go left if you're a big Raya fan. Either way, one of the two sides is going to be upset. But as a club, it won't go wrong, because if Ramsdale gets back, continues to be your number one, or now Raya continues to be your number one, it will be because they've been performing at a high level, because they're both very good goalies. So Arsenal wins out regardless. One of the players will be the loser. Like that, and I really doubt either one of them is going to accept the 50-50 role. They're both too good to be. They've been playing Premier League football as number ones for the last couple of seasons. They've been performing at a high level, both of them, and I just can't see long term how it's going to work. So, some fans will be upset. You might have some embarrassing moments where Arteta talks rubbish when he tries to justify it, but it's fine, because basically it's a lose-lose. It's a win-win. There's no way you can lose with these two goalies. They're both good. It's not like you're choosing between two different shades of shit. You're choosing between two very good goalies.
But there's the only way that we can lose, though, is if this unsettles the rest of the team. You see, this is what I'm saying. In terms of the quality of the goalies, of course, it's a win-win, because they're both really, really good goalkeepers. So regardless of, the competition aspect will make one of them better than the other, right? Quite clearly, one will stand out over the other. That's how things tend to go. But at the same time, if we've got all this attention on it, if we've got people questioning Arteta, if it doesn't work out, let's say, for example, he brings Raya in, Raya goes baps up, and Ramsdale comes back in, if Raya's gone baps up, it's probably resulted in us losing a game or in us drawing a game. So I think in the short term, there are ways that it can negatively affect the team in terms of morale, but also in terms of performances, right? Because the lack of stability in that position we've seen doesn't help anyone, right? Like, whenever you've got in the defensive part of a team, if you don't have stability in who you're playing, and this is about Man United as well, if you don't have stability in who you're playing in that back sit or that back four, right, and back, obviously the goalkeeper too, it does create implications for the rest of the team, and it creates implications for the results of the team too. So he's doing a lot of tinkering, which has actually hurt us so far this season. We haven't played very well, and I would argue a lot of the tinkering is down to, a lot of the bad results are down to some of the tinkering that he's done. So if he's going to go and tinker a lot with the goalkeeping position, it could hurt our results. If he chooses the wrong one at the wrong time, it's going to make us look stupid in the media. It's going to make him look stupid in the media. It's going to create some fan discourse, right? Because he's not doing normal things. So everyone's going to look at this weird thing that he's done as being the reason why everything's going badly for us, if it does. And then obviously the results of the team might suffer because we don't have the stability in the position. So I do think it can go wrong. And this is where people like Ben Foster, I get what they're talking about. It can go wrong. And that's where I'm worried.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I of course, there's always a worst case scenario, but I really think you're talking about a 1% chance of that kind of stuff, because they're both top goalies. I think you talked about the character of Ramsdale. We don't really know Raya's character necessarily. I haven't really seen too much about him, but Ramsdale doesn't seem like the type of character to throw his toys out the pram. So even if he does become unsettled and may want to leave, I think that'll be all it is. And I don't think it will necessarily become this huge thing that you're talking about. And I think stylistically as well, the difference between Ramsdale to Raya is not the same as a De Gea to Onana. Like,
of course, those are like polar opposites.
Your team transitions, your team transitions shouldn't really be massively affected by it. And to be honest, you didn't really see that in the game against Everton. It didn't look outwardly obvious that you had a new goalie who played a wildly different style. Sure, there's some attributes. He's a bit higher up the pitch. Like you described, he's kind of takes a bit more time on the ball. He feels a little bit more comfortable on the ball to dribble out and play kind of shorter, intricate passes. But Ramsdale's not poor at any of those things. So I feel like your team will be able to cope with it. And I think it's going to be a positive regardless. But like I said, there might be some memeable moments. There might be some things where people who are fans of Ramsdale or Raya will get their nose bent out of shape. But yeah, it's interesting. Do you now think, just to close this question quickly, Do you think Raya is now your number one? Do you think this is
No,
like the baton being handed, or do you still think it's up in the air?
no, I don't think it is. I think if it were a different manager, a different team, then I could say yes. So, for example, if it was like Roy Hodgson and he was changing from Johnston to somebody else, I'd be like, yeah, he's done now. Johnston, sit on the bench for a while. Knowing Arteta and what he's been doing so far this season and what kind of breed he comes from, no, I don't think. I don't think either of them are number one, which is what's strange about it. I would say I'd probably still favour Ramsdale to be the number one for the team, but I guess we'll kind of find out tomorrow, or I guess
Yeah, that's in.
for those listeners today.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Because I do lean on the side now that I think you're right. Ramsdale hasn't thrown in a clanger to warrant necessarily being dropped, but I do think Raya coming in will lead towards him being the number one now. And I do think Arteta got him in with the view for him to be the number one eventually, or but like an open ended question to Ramsdale. This is the plan, but you have an opportunity to obviously keep the shirt if you play the way we want you to, and you improve, or you fight for the jersey and get it back. But I do think we're leaning towards that way, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Raya in goal in the Champions League and in goal in the North London derby. I really wouldn't be shocked. I actually think that's where I'm leaning.
I don't think he
towards
would have
on that
waited
side.
this long to do that, though. I feel like from the get go, he played Havertz, he played Partey in a right back position. He already took risks. So if he was going to do that with the goalkeeper, I think he would have done it already. So that's why I think there's still a chance
Yeah,
for
but Raya,
Ramsdale, and I think he's still going to get in.
yeah, no, I see the logic in it, but I just think Raya came in later in the window. I think there's other things that it may have kind of required him to have a little bit more of a like kind of bedding in period. And who knows? There was some chat around. I'm not saying Ramsdale had a bad game in the United game because I do think he was decent, but there were some people saying he could have saved the Rashford goal. There were some people that were saying that maybe that's something that you could look at, but I think it would be a stretch. But I do think. Yeah, anyway, that's just my opinion. I think, and it's not a bad thing because I rate Raya. I think he's a good goalie, and I think
Also, I mean, bear in mind,
stylistically
Ramsdale's
he does
coming off
well.
at international duty where he played. He actually started for us, right? So that could also play into things as well. So we don't
Yeah,
we
true.
really don't know. It's very early to
We'll
call, but
see.
I see why you might say that because Raya had a good game and he was very commanding of his box in a way that Ramsdale hasn't been before. So I can see it. It could happen. I just still think that Ramsdale's got enough credit in the bank to stay on for a little
Yeah,
bit longer.
you would hope so. That makes sense. Now let's get into kind of the big talking point in the game
Oh
because
yeah,
as we talked about, there wasn't too many big talking points really. But there's
yeah,
obviously the Martinelli offside goal,
bloody hell.
which took ages for them to first of all make a decision on.
Yeah.
And then it looked like they were examining two different parts of the move.
The
First,
phases, yeah.
the Eddie and Ketia involvement, which they judged to be slightly offside, and then also the Martinelli final stage, which again they judged, I think, to be offside. Right, so uh, I'm lost, mate. But what's your opinion on it? What did you think it
I
was
mean,
offside? Either one or what?
by the rule book, yes, but the rule book is stupid, and this is something that we've discussed before, right? If we're going to go by the rules, then yeah, fair enough, because I think the rule was if Beto was not intentionally playing the ball back, then it still can be counted as offside. Even if Gabriel was not trying to pass it to Nketiah at all, it clearly was not intended for him. It was intended for somebody else that Beto intercepted and ended up going in that direction towards Nketiah. But by the rule book, I guess, yes, that is offside. But that's stupid because had it Gabriel tried to play it to Nketiah and it just took like a little deflection of somebody else, then I get why that rule would be in place, right? Because nothing was really affected in the phase of play. Gabriel was trying to get it to Nketiah and Beto played it and Nketiah was offside, so it's offside. I get that. But in this case, Gabriel was not trying to play the ball to Nketiah. Nketiah would have not have known or been aware of the fact that this ball was going to come to him. So of course he's not going to be trying to stay on side, right? It's a reaction to what Beto did in intercepting the ball. And I think that's just the way I see it. I didn't even see like the second phase. I didn't see them reviewing the second phase. I just saw them go straight to the first phase and be like, okay, that's offside. And now in terms of it, was Nketiah actually offside? I don't know. Like I was reading the rules yesterday because I was so confused, and apparently the way that the Premier League implements VAR is that they have to have at least 5 cameras. And in my mind, they then apparently are supposed to use those 5 cameras to draw lines on the pitch that are 1 pixel wide. And so I'm like, okay, great. If you're going to do 1 pixel wide, that's enough. 1 pixel is tiny. But the view that they give us to zoom in to show us is never clear enough. They do it at this very far zoomed angle and they make the lines thicker so that you can see them, right? Because they're only 1 pixel wide. But then they look like they're at the same exact level when you zoom out like that and you make the lines thicker. So I can't tell, is that offside or onside? And this is how bad it got when Gary Neville, of all people, is saying that that's onside. I can't believe that. That seems like they've guessed in favour of Arsenal. Then you know something's like weird is going on. So I'm not going to complain too much because we didn't end up losing the game and it didn't end up being a big one. But my main 2 points are the rules are stupid and they clearly haven't been developed based off of the actual intention of the game. They've just been developed off of something else and then applied elsewhere. And then second of all, if they've got the right technology, because I've heard Goldbridge complaining that they haven't got the tech for it. They haven't got the tech for it because one geezer sent him a super chat that said they don't have the tech for it. But I think they do have the tech for it. They're just not showing it properly to the people that are watching. So to us, it looks like they draw the lines wonky. To us, it looks like the head is ahead of the shoulders because the angles they're giving us are so crap. So I just think they're not doing themselves any favors with how they're presenting any of these things on telly. So rules are stupid. It's being implemented terribly.
I agree with you, man. I've never understood that intentional back pass, unintentional pass from your own teammate making you on or offside thing. I think it was a lot clearer how it used to be, where if a defender made contact with the ball and you were in an offside position, you're automatically not offside and you take intention out of it. But they've changed the rule recently and it, to be honest, confuses the F out of me now. And now you're bringing intention into the to the decision making process. It becomes even murkier, like the handball rule, which we won't talk on anymore until the next one f's me over or f's you over. But yeah, very smelly decision. And again, when I looked at the lines, it was like the Garnacho one. Like to my naked eye, you have an opinion, but when you look at what's supposed to be the official, like kind of opinion based on all the facts and all the angles and stuff like that, it confuses you and puts you right back to the starting point. Because then, yeah, when I looked at those lines, they all look like they're onside. And if they're being judged offside, it's going back to the ridiculous nature of the armpit hairs being offside. Remember when VAR was first implemented and everyone was outraged? And I get it. Like, you know, I love Gary Neville. Historically, I can recognize he's been talking out of his for, you know, the last maybe 18 months, maybe 24. But I agree with him on that. It does actually seem like they're bloody guessing. The way they're showing us, and maybe you're right, maybe they're doing themselves a disservice, but I don't know, man. Listening to Howard Webb's show that he's got with Michael Owen, where they talk about the decision making, listening to them talk about it, I don't know how clear they are about what the decisions they're making. I actually do think there's elements of guessing and just like, you know, the vibes
Yeah.
at the moment, kind of leading them down a certain decision. So yeah, I think it was poor, man, and I actually think that goal would have set the goal alight, and you would have had a better game because it would have opened it up earlier. Everton would have been forced to come out and start playing and not be, you know, 15 man behind the ball style boring football. But it just made for a worse spectacle, and you know it took forever, and it looked like they had no clue what they were doing. And like you said, the rules for that first Nketiah play should not be. That's not how that move should have been judged. Not by that criteria. That's absolutely ridiculous, and they're making it harder for themselves. But you know, we can make a whole referee complaining podcast with the amount we chat about them.
I
So
mean, it would be 5 hours long every week as well because they stink,
yeah,
mate.
exactly. Yeah. So let's move on to the next kind of key question now that I've gotten. It should be a fairly straightforward one. Like,
Yeah.
are you happy with this starting 11? Is this the starting 11 now that you want to see go forward, or do you still think he needs to do more tweaking? Because from what it sounds like you said earlier, even though really the results haven't been massively affected by the tweaking, to be honest. One draw against Fulham,
Yeah, more the
aside,
performances, yeah.
you've won everything else. Do you want to stick now with this starting 11? Would you like to see Fabio Vieira start again? Would you like to see Raya start again? And if not, like, what do you think is going to be the final starting 11 that you use for the most of the season?
I mean, based on merit, I feel like Fabio Vieira deserves to start now. So from that point of view, Havertz has had 4 very underwhelming games. I think it's time for him to ride bench a little bit and watch Fabio Vieira play a little bit, because Vieira's been in the team. He's had some pretty good performances of late. I know it wasn't great at the back end of last season, but he looks like he's, confident. And I think it's always good for a manager to take advantage of that confidence when they can. So I think he deserves to play. I mean, again, with the Raya question, I don't mind either of the two. If he wants to start Raya, that's totally fine. I think he should still go back to Ramsdale, just because I think, again, as you were kind of talking about before, we know what we've got with Ramsdale. And I think I'd like to see cameos of Raya so I can figure him out, because obviously it's clear that Ramsdale's a pretty big personality in the changing room too, which I think is important for this team. In terms of the defence, obviously there's some injuries there, so I'm not sure I want to see Gabriel starting right back. If that was actually true and he did actually start right back, I'd still prefer to see him start centre or left centre back alongside of Zinchenko with Saliba, and then White playing on the playing on the right hand side. I think that would be good. I do want to see Gabby Jesus start. I mean, I like Nketiah, and I think he's good for our team, but at the same time, I don't think he's done enough now to warrant being the starter over Gabby Jesus. I think Gabby Jesus has been exciting every time he's come on the pitch for us. He's a hard worker. He's a bit of a house, which I like. And I think is going to be very important for the North London derby, especially when you've got the opposite of him on the other side, Richarlison, who's also a Brazilian house. So I think it will be important for him to play. And I think the only other shout I'd say is I feel like Trossard might need to start soon. Maybe there's a chance that, with Martinelli out now for a couple of weeks, maybe Trossard needs to be the one to start on that left-hand side. So I don't know how things are going to go, just because obviously it's fluid and injuries are a big thing. And obviously now with European football coming into play, it's going to change things around. But I'd like to see Ramsdale back in goal. I want to see Gabriel back at left centre-back, keep Fabio Vieira at centre mid, and then stick Trossard on the left-hand side with Gabby Jesus playing up top. So I don't want to see the exact starting 11 because I don't think we lit the world on fire, but I think it was more in the direction of what Arsenal fans were expecting based off of our kind of performances last season and the formation that we played.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, man. I think I think it would be an overreaction maybe to stick completely with this starting 11, but I do think you're right. Some problem areas have been solved by some of the changes he's made. And, there are a few more tweaks I think probably get you guys flowing a bit better. All right, we've done 40 plus minutes on Arsenal. I've tried my best to elongate this as long as possible. But I know what time it is. It's time to go.
It's time to go. Exactly. A 3-1 defeat to Brighton again. Or was it 32 matches at home that you hadn't lost? The last team that you'd lost to at home was Brighton. And they've come back and done it again, mate. How did you feel about that game? Because I'll be honest with you, you were actually playing well in the first half. You were doing things. And maybe if that disallowed goal had stood, we'd be sat here and you'd be smiling and not frowning. What did you think of it?
I agree with your first point that we played decent in chunks of the first half. I wouldn't say the whole first half though, because I do think after they scored, like the momentum shifted a bit. We were seeing a little bit less of the ball because I think before that point we had like 60 plus possession, 60+% possession. So that's pretty good going against a Brighton team, whether you're home or away. They generally dominate the ball. So I think Ten Hag got his initial tactics pretty much on the money. I think we were creating chances. We didn't have cutting edge. I think Rashford was so wasteful and really greedy, to be honest, for a lot of those chances because the majority of them fell to him. Um, I felt really bad for Hoyland because I feel like he put an absolute shift in. He was making good movements. He was getting into good spaces. He just never got the ball. And the annoying thing was the only time he did get the ball was when the ball apparently had gone out of play, and the goal was disallowed. So it's quite frustrating because I feel like we've had a few games like this, like I could call out Spurs away, where we had a good chunk of um, the ball, we're knocking it about decently, creating chances, and just not finishing our dinner. And then the momentum swings at some point, and also as a result, probably of the opposition managers making tweaks and being more proactive in game and changing that like momentum within the match. Because I think Ange Postecoglou definitely did that at half time against Spurs, and I think De Zerbi definitely did that again at half time for Brighton. Because I think in the second half they battered us. And I don't think there was any sign of a fight back, any sign of any kind of desire, determination. Seeing some of the goals that Brighton scored in the second half and the way that they just moved the ball around us and we were like statues. And you see players, and again, I don't want to hammer Rashford because I love old Rashi, but just not even making an effort to close people down, like jogging, just looking disinterested, looking like don't stink, and he's too big for tracking back and chasing players. It's not looking good, bruv. That performance was. It's hard to say performance because, like you said, the first half was decent, and I feel like we were more than a match for Brighton. But the overall game, the drop off, the way we ended up just getting moved to in the second half, um, it's not good. And hearing some of the comments after again, I don't know what Ten Hag's been smoking recently, but nearly every single press conference he's just doing his best Danny Mills impression and just straight waffling out of his arse. But I don't know if crisis is the right word, but we got big issues, man. We got big issues. Um, and yeah, like there's so many things that I think that happened in the game that we should be doing better. Like I said, Rashford should be either taking some of those chances himself or preferably squaring them to Hoyland or another player in a better position who's got a higher chance of scoring. I think Casemiro again just got absolutely ran circles around. I think Regulon actually looked all right. I think I probably put him forward
Reguilon
as
was
one
one
of
of
the
your
better
better players,
performers.
yeah.
Yeah, he was overlapping really well. He showed a lot of desire. He looked kind of like Regulon at Sevilla in those original days that kind of got Tottenham to buy him, and I think we were interested in him at that point. And he looked
He kept
okay.
Adingra very quiet for the most part.
Yeah, and Adingra's decent, man. He's quite
He's
lively, so
good.
that
Yeah.
he did well. Um, I think Lissandro Martinez was absolutely shocking. Got put on his ass again, which seems to be a regular occurrence now. He's just sitting down more than he's standing up, which is quite frustrating. And to have that done to him by Pascal Gross, and no disrespect to him, he's a decent player, but he's not exactly madly techie or got some dirty like body movement that will send man to the shops. But he absolutely did him up a kipper. Um, I think Lindelof also for the first goal got just nowhere near his man. Oh yeah, I
What
mean
did you make of like the lineup? Because obviously Bruno Fernandes started out on the right wing, right? And I feel like
yeah.
maybe Hoyland needed service, right? And he wasn't getting it from Rashford because Rashford is used to just going and banging in goals himself. He's not used to playing with a proper nine. Um, and maybe had Bruno been playing in the middle, he might have got a bit more service. What did you make of that whole kind of lineup issue and how Bruno started out on the right?
Now, with all the issues we've got going on at the moment, I thought it was a guarantee that Bruno was going to start out on the right, and I'm not one of those fans, United fans, who like get livid and crazy if we see Bruno out on the right. He's decent there. He obviously doesn't have the explosive acceleration to like beat a man, but he swings in good crosses from the right. He's very effective there when he plays there for Portugal as well. I know they're playing Luxembourg or whatever, but majority of his assists came from the right wing, and I'm not
Yeah, he
mad
did a
at that.
dirty Trivella, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly, and I'm not mad at that. I think he performs really well from that side, and he's got a good delivery. So that's kind of what you're asking for. Crosses being swung into to Hoyland from that side, but it just because of our lack of organisation. And the fact that we were actually looked like we were playing more of a diamond midfield, he wasn't really out on the right for a big portion of that match. He was kind of still drifting in centrally, and then the
Yeah,
tactical
because it was more
changes
of like a
that
diamond, I guess. He
yeah,
didn't
it was a
actually
diamond
start out
midfield.
on a
Yeah,
wing. Yeah.
no, he was kind of right sided centre midfield of the diamond, but he still was kind of swapping positions with Ericsson at different points. So it was very fluid and it worked, I would say. And I think it was a big contributing factor to why we kind of had more of the ball and how we kind of flummoxed them in those initial periods of the game. But once the Zerbi made those tactical tweaks and they just started pinging balls out to their wing backs that were really far wide
Yeah,
and
Lamptey
kind of
was causing serious
yeah,
problems.
they kind of just broke that whole tactical plan, and we didn't respond, and Ten Hag didn't find a way to kind of to solve that problem. So yeah, no, I wasn't too mad at the Bruno thing. I have to also call out Onana. I think should be doing better for a couple of those
Yeah,
goals as well.
100%.
Um, I think the gross shot was in distance. He should have saved it. I think the João Pedro goal absolutely should have been saved. Um, I even think the first Welbeck goal, even though it was kind of shot quite quickly and it was from a short distance, I've seen top goalies save that. So I don't think any of the goals were absolutely um, no chance for him. I think he had a chance to save all three of them. So I think he's got to look at himself. I saw some stat that he's faced 10 shots and conceded 7 goals. That's smelly. You can't be doing that. But I know there's some trade offs for having a goalie with better distribution and better on the ball, but we're not talking trading off his general shot stopping completely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He can't just be just a sieve letting everything through. He's got to stop some stuff. So I think he should be disappointed with that performance. Yeah, where does it end? I think McTominay was pretty much invisible for the whole match.
I saw that he had
Um,
like by far the lowest amount of touches on the ball before he came off, I think.
yeah, and that's a common thread for him. He goes missing in matches, or he goes voluntarily hiding. Like I don't know what it is, but as a central midfielder, pure central midfielder, it's clear now that that's not his role. Like for Scotland, he plays way more advanced and he has an impact. I'm not expecting him to score bundles of goals for us, but if you know that that's his, strength or that's one of his strengths, then why persist with playing him as a deep line midfielder? That's he's not doing well in that position. So, yeah, man, I don't know if I have anyone really to put in the best performance other than I guess Reguilon, who played semi decently. I think Hoyland looked fairly lively. The rest of them were pretty shite at different
What
levels.
about old? I don't know I don't know how to pronounce the name. Medjbury, Maybury.
Oh, Hannibal. Yeah,
Yeah,
he came on. He looked lively. He put himself about. He's a
got a
bit
good
of
goal.
a. Yeah, it was decent. It was decent.
I wasn't sure about the celebration after it, but I understand he's a young player and
Yeah,
he's got his first goal at Old
yeah, yeah.
Trafford, so I understand
He's
that.
finally getting a
But
chance. Yeah, he's finally getting a chance. He was decent on loan last year at Birmingham. I think he's a decent player. He's already been playing for Tunisia's national team for a couple of seasons now. He puts himself about. I remember that time we went to Anfield and we were getting absolutely slapped. I don't think it was a 7-0, but I think it was probably a 5-0 or 4-0 that we had the season before that. And he was out there trying to clamp people and he looked like he was, had a bit more desire. So he's always been a player who's willing to like give 100% and basically do all the opposites of what the rest of our team have been doing for the beginning part of the season, man. So yeah, crisis might be a slight overreaction, but we're definitely in some serious problems right now and serious trouble.
yeah,
And the way that Ten Hag's talking, it doesn't fill me with as much confidence that we're going to be able to pull ourselves back up to kind of where we were last season. Because when we had blips last season, the way Ten Hag was responding was the way you'd expect to see your manager, or you hope to see your manager respond, with some defiance, with some acknowledgement that we've been, with some kind of assurances that he's going to work on things and certain things can't run. Whereas right now, I don't know, man, it almost seems like an acceptance that things are a bit effed up. It seems like a bit of delusion here and there when he makes certain comments as well. So I don't know, man. It's a
I
really
feel like
strange moment.
he does seem to be getting somewhat desperate at the moment, because obviously I think that was something that I think I really liked about him last season. And I mentioned it at the end of kind of when we were wrapping up last season. I mentioned it must feel really good. I think there was the episode where Dom came on, and I mentioned it must be really good to have a manager that's like super defiant and kind of answers questions well and shows like real accountability, like kind of total accountability for the team in his press conferences. And I think ever since I've said that, he's gone the opposite way now. And it appears that he's now blaming a lot more on kind of external things and a little bit less on what he can do as a manager. And I'm starting to get a little bit worried for him. And this kind of get onto my kind of major question, which is, I feel like at the moment with Ten Hag, there's not much more you can do to show your team that you mean business than to get rid of one of the best players ever in your team because he doesn't track back, to sack off one of the most exciting players, or at the time one of the most exciting players in the world. I feel like he's shown quite a lot. Like, he benched your best player last season for being late. He's done a lot of things to show that team you lot need to fix up, and it apparently has not fully worked. And it's getting to a point now where, like, I feel like desperation maybe is a good word to explain how he sounds in his press conferences. So that leads me on to the question, which is, I keep getting these adverts from Betfred and whoever else saying, Pochettino, Ten Hag, they've got their odds are dropping for them to be sacked this season. And so we've obviously seen some criticism on some call-in shows and that, like TalkSport and all them lot, where some fans are going in on him and saying, get rid of him. He's not the right man to lead the club. How do you see it? Like, how far does it need to go with Man United before you can see Ten Hag getting the sack?
Yeah, I mean, everything's so reactionary. So last season, I think everyone was understandably kind of jumping on the Ten Hag bandwagon a lot because, to be honest, we overachieved with the signings we managed to get in, with the deadwood we still had available, with some of the batterings we received. We still finished in third and managed to win a trophy, which was super important for us at that time. And probably not what was expected of Ten Hag in that first season. So I think there's this idea that he's got a bit of credit in the bank, which I do buy into. But he's got to get some criticism. And he's got to get some criticism for, I think, two main reasons. The first obvious reason is on the pitch, and why he's not getting the best out of the players that he's had at his disposal at the beginning of the season. I do think there's some caveats with that, though, and I will get my mini violin out and say the injuries we've had have obviously... The teams we've been able to select are definitely nowhere near his first choice 11. And I think that is something we can all at least agree and acknowledge. So it's been quite difficult. He's had some obstacles on that side. Then you've obviously got all of this crazy... He is justified in the external factors thing, because having Greenwood, Sancho and Antony situations all happening in quick succession before kind of the season's even kicked off is mad. Like, I can't think of another team that's had to deal with that many incidents, separate crazy incidents in such a short space of time. But again, there's no one to blame for that other than ourselves and the club. Maybe not Ten Hag, because I don't think he's created these situations. I know there's some content creators out there that blame him with the Sancho stuff, and I have to have my say on this very quickly. He's right, and he's well within his rights to explain the reason why he didn't select Sancho. And if it purely is because in his mind, his training levels haven't reached the required level to start or be in the squad, then that's fair. That is not him digging out a player. I don't know where we've gone with all these fans and content creators and people in the football like fraternity and society, where they all think this now justifies like throwing him under the bus and saying he's done XYZ. Watch the press conference. He couldn't be more clinical in the way that he says it. There's no emotion. It's clear there's no like deep ulterior motive. He's just explained the situation. Now, some people might be right in that he's doing it to try and get a reaction. Sure. But he didn't do a Jose. He didn't do a Pep. He didn't do some managers who've gone out there and absolutely thrown them under the bus. What he did was actually very timid, very tame, and I think something that a manager should be allowed to do without getting all of this backlash that he's now gotten from the media and some of our own fans, some rival fans, talking about how they're throwing him under the bus. Jadon Sancho has dealt with this absolutely poorly. So, okay, football's changed. You may not be able to be how Sir Alex Ferguson was, Arsene Wenger was, and have complete control in the club anymore and treat players in a certain way anymore, and that's fair enough. But you should now and in the future always be allowed to explain why a player hasn't been selected without it being this big thing that's been created. It's only become a big thing because Jadon Sancho decided to post his iPhone notes on social media and talk about him being a scapegoat. And the annoying thing is the media have now made him a scapegoat, but I don't think Ten Hag had made him a scapegoat. Ten Hag had backed him this whole time and literally just said he didn't train well. Like, my God, that's not digging someone out. And that's certainly not scapegoating. So sadly, I think his career is going to be done at United. And I think he's only got himself to blame. I really don't think you can blame anyone else in this scenario. You can only blame himself for the way he's been training, for the way he's been playing on the pitch, and for everything that's gone on around his career. It's only him. Only he needs to look in the mirror. So that's another thing that's, obviously caused some instability, because I'm sure he's, close with Rashi, he's close with a few players in the squad. And, it can set, the cat amongst the pigeons. And the second thing that I think you could say Ten Hag deserves criticism for is some of the rubbish he's been saying in the press conferences. He hasn't been defiant. He hasn't been speaking like someone who, is upset with how the team has been performing. And he's completely kind of gone inward, and kind of now it looks very much like he's kind of just accepting of how things are going, and now trying to take no responsibility for how the team is performing and trying to resolve some of the issues that I've just mentioned. So he absolutely deserves criticism. He absolutely should not be waffling some of the rubbish he's been saying in press conferences. At the same time, there shouldn't be fans going on TalkSport or wherever saying he should be sacked and he's caused all these problems. He's literally the firefighter taking on a whole building on fire. And he's not to blame for that fire. He's just trying to fix it. He might not be, aiming his hose at the right areas to get it done at the moment, but he's trying. And our club stinks. And it's the one thing that rival fans have been saying forever. And to be honest, a lot of United fans have been saying for a good chunk of time, we are a poorly run club. We've made so many mistakes, some of which that have been invisible, but they all eventually come home to roost. And sadly for Ten Hag, it seems to be a lot of them are happening now at the same time, and he's having to deal with them. So, sure, he definitely should be doing better. He should definitely be getting the players to play better. He should definitely be talking with more sense and more defiance in his press conferences, and he hasn't been doing that recently. But I don't see a world in which he's no longer the manager this season. I think he will see out the season regardless.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I agree with you for the most part of that. I definitely think that Sancho has kind of brought it upon himself, and I feel like when we were watching the TalkSport kind of press conference clip, he was pretty clear about it. There was nothing disparaging that he said about Sancho, and I think everyone kind of just made a much bigger deal out of it. because of the fact that Sancho came out and kind of answered it. So I do think maybe Sancho is the one that kind of started that, but then there's got to be a ton of blame placed on the media for how they kind of just amplified it and made it go a lot more viral than it really needed to be. There's nothing wrong with calling a player out if they're not training well. If it's completely different, then Sancho, come out and back yourself. Tell me exactly what he did to say that. Don't just give me a cryptic message to say you're being scapegoated and it's for other reasons that you won't name. So come out, do a Piers Morgan interview if you have to, mate. I don't mind. Do whatever you got to
Might as
do.
well.
At this point, Piers Morgan will take anyone he can get. So
But I would have respected. I would have respected that more. Like the Ronaldo Piers Morgan thing, he literally just like dropped a bomb and he was like, "F
massive
this,
cojones,
it's
yeah.
irreparable. I'm just gonna go and do, what I can and just go out with a blaze of, I don't want to say glory because it ended quite sadly, but Sancho did it so timid. It's literally been consistent. His performances, his behaviour, everything about Sancho since he's been at United has been timid. Even his response to Ten Hag was timid. So yeah, stinks, man. And I love Sancho. people have seen me on this pod before back him and still say, I'll be there for him. But yeah, I don't know, man. This is where I draw the line. There's no coming back from this.
Well, I mean, particularly because he's kind of somewhat inadvertently kind of knocked over the first domino that's leading to other negative things for the club, right? Because I think we can't separate some of this media criticism that's happening from the performances that you see on the field, right? It's really difficult to say that these things haven't affected Ten Hag, they haven't affected the team, the morale, all of the things. When, as you said, with injuries, I will concede that you have had an absolute shocker so far with injuries, and you just don't need something else to be coming in and making things even worse for you. So I think from that perspective, I agree completely. And I wanted to get onto one more thing before we move to the kind of Champions League and Game Week 6 preview, and that's really all around the Glazers. I saw Gary Neville came out on X, and he wrote quite a long tweet addressing the fact that it's still the Glazers' fault. Kind of alluded to the fact that if you own a business, you have to own all of the failures and all of the successes by yourself. That's what you have to do. So I wanted to just kind of get to that point and say, he kind of had mentioned, performances on the pitch can be erratic and cyclical, but it's the owners that put you in the best position to actually win matches and for that performance to be kind of positively cyclical, right? To be more often than not good. So I guess my question to you is, like, how much of the blame for the recent performances and the recent issues that you've had can be put on the Glazers? Do you think it's like 100% their fault? Do you think it's 50-50? Where are you sitting here?
It's a hard one, man, because I've obviously seen that tweet from G Nev. He's been fairly consistent in the last 2.5, 3 years or so with his criticism of the Glazers. Obviously, most United fans would agree that they're absolute scumbags and we need to get them out. But it's hard for me to say like every single morsel of blame can be put on their doorstep. Like they are obviously the owners, so they control the purse strings, they set the culture, they are directly responsible for a lot of the instability and malaise that we've seen this summer with all the sale rumors and all of these things going on around it. So I think they are heavily to blame for basically the moment Sir Alex Ferguson left the club till now. I think when Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill were there, it was obvious that they ran the ship and that the Glazers were kind of silent investors just raking in the dough as, the club was getting more and more successful. As soon as they left and they got more control, they've proved to be completely incompetent. They've proved to not give a shit about the club and the team and the performances on the pitch. They've been terrible custodians of the club. Like, they've literally let the stadium rot. They've let our training facilities just, be overtaken by pretty much every single Premier League club. So by every barometer you can look at a good owner, they pretty much fail all of them. The only one that the argument people use around the spending money, I get it. It's true. They could have been worse, even worse. They could have decided they're going to spend 5% of our revenue rather than 40% or whatever it is that they end up spending on transfers. But the thing that people always forget to, and it's a problem that your club, Johnson, and Arsenal have as well, is we sell poorly. So when you look at, for example, Liverpool, who are another club where their owners don't put any of their own money into it, they kind of don't have to, because they run the organization, they run the business well. They put good people in position to make key decisions that will help, set the club on the right course. And big part of that is selling. And you guys are terrible at selling. We're terrible at selling, even worse probably, and that hampers your business as well. So if you're not going to sell well, then you need to put more money in, because you still need to get better players. And this is what happened this summer, where they talk all this rubbish about we need to sell to buy. Or maybe it wasn't rubbish, because you saw at the end we got Amrabat on loan. So that's a big part of their transfer responsibility that they've completely failed. Sure, have they put money in? Yes. Can you say any of the money that we've spent has been spent well? Some of the players have been decent, but nearly every single player we've talked about this has been overspent.
Was true. Ten Hag said it in his press conference. He was talking a lot of crap. He did say even Brighton spend money. But the one thing he did say that I think was accurate was, Man United come into a transfer and try and buy someone, you're going to get bumped. It's just the way of the world. Everyone knows that you spend money terribly, and they come at you. They know, just kind of like Chelsea these days as well. We're going to bump you for this. And Man United are really the godfathers of that movement of getting bumped by smaller teams. So that was one thing that he did say that I thought was actually accurate in amongst a bunch of crap.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's another facet that you can blame the Glazers, right? They, maybe not them personally, although I would like to add, it's well known that they have final sign-off on all big transfers. So even though they hired Ed Woodward, even though they've now got Richard Arnold, even though we've now got John Murtough, who's the director of football, still they require sign-off. So when we can't get Perisic because we're 5 million out at the time, it was because they didn't want to sign him off. When we've been trying to get other players and we've just not been able to make the transfer work because the finances weren't right, it's because the Glazers decided they weren't. And the annoying part of that financial debate is they should always be right for us. We should be allowed to waste and piss away all the money in the world, because we generally, we actually generate it. Sure, it's not good for the game. Sure, it makes it it's an unlevel playing field and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of the club generating that much money, of course, the fans want to see that much money being spent. If it's not directly on players on the pitch, at least let it be on the infrastructure. At least let it be on something else, so we know that you actually care about the club. All of which they don't do. All of which they've proven the opposite by taking dividends and just constantly trying to suck money out of the club. The fact that we've now got more than £1 billion in debt, it's obvious that they're poor owners. But at the same time, you can't say 100%, because even with poor owners, they don't go on the pitch. And of course, what Alan Shearer said is true as well. Match of the Day, he said, the culture eventually comes down from the top and seeps down from the top onto the pitch. And I think the biggest thing that they've impacted on the squad is all the player power that we've got in. And you see it, all the leaks coming out, all of this coming out. We didn't have that under Sir Alex Ferguson. We didn't have that under David Gill. And ever since they've been more involved in the club and the running of the club, we've always had that. And it undermines the manager. It undermines the harmony in the team, because then they don't sell those players who are upset. They don't sell the Maguires, the McTominays, the Dean Hendersons, all these people that have been creating instability in the team. They keep them. So it just allows that kind of negative culture to keep growing and becoming a bigger and bigger problem. So, yeah, I would give them a lion share of the blame, 100%. They smell, they're terrible, and they don't care about us. But yeah, 100% is mad. And of course, we've got the tools. They have bought some players for us to do better than we're currently doing. So it's not 100%, but they will always be involved as a reason as to why the club is failing, as long as they're the owners, because they've proven it non-stop that they don't care about the club.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really feel like they run you like an NFL or like an NBA team, where they're just expecting that if you do terribly, you're going to be able to draft the next LeBron or something. There's something about the way that they run your club that doesn't fit into kind of the football pyramid or just football teams outside of America anyway. So I agree with you. They are run terribly, and I think that there is a hell of a lot of blame to be put onto them. But let's move on now to kind of the last segment. Obviously, the Champions League is back. Well, hey, we've got some big games coming up tomorrow for both Man United and for Arsenal. We'll start with United. So you guys have got Bayern away. Good luck with that one. But luckily, you're going to have a nice little easy return back to the Premier when you come back to the Premier League with an away match against Burnley. Let's quickly review both of those or preview both of those matches. Tomorrow, there's a funny tweet going around that Man United had tweeted out that they're going to they've just given Bayern the 3 points and they don't want to go to Germany. How do you think it's going to be on the pitch? Do you think you're going to get battered? Do you think you'll turn it around? Are you going to get a bounce that Ten Hag has typically seen when he gets battered?
Nah, I don't think we'll get battered. Touch wood. Battering incoming, but I think we'll probably lose. I wouldn't be shocked if we got a draw. But yeah, I think the heavy betting's got to be on us taking the L in Munich. I will say their defense looks dodgy though.
Any defense with Upamecano in it is a defense that can let in goals.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've also got that goalie Ulrich in goal, who's obviously not Neuer. They've got very attacking fullbacks. Kim Min-jae looks good. But
he can't clean up for Upamecano. Sometimes.
Exactly. They've basically got two bums next to him because De Ligt is absolutely shit as well. So they're just absolutely next to Kim Min-jae. He's basically by himself trying to mop up all of the disasters going on around him. I think also the fact that they haven't really got a pure DM that Thomas Tuchel's happy with as well kind of leaves them a bit exposed. So I wouldn't be shocked to see us, make an impact and score a couple goals, create them some problems. But ultimately, our defense is poor, and Harry Kane's on a scoring streak. So I would expect us to lose narrowly, or maybe 2-0, 3-1, something like the Brighton score, to be honest. And for the Burnley game, I expect us to win, but I expect us equally. I expect it kind of to be the reversal of the Bayern game. I expect us to get a narrow win. I don't expect us to pull up trees. I don't expect us to spank them. I expect us to be really nervy. The only benefit, I think, is that Vincent Kompany's Burnley play open football. So that will give us a chance.
You're going to get chances, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get chances. And I think we should have enough about us to get a narrow win. I don't think it will be special. I don't think it will be something that will really build the confidence. But I think it will just be the kind of, the starting point for us to hopefully start building some better results on top of. But yeah, as you can imagine, off the week I've just had in the last couple of weeks, I'm not filled with loads of optimism. But yeah, let's hope on Saturday evening I'll be coming off at least one win this week. Let's talk about Arsenal though, because you've got two home games. I think your Champions League draw has been fairly kind to you. So you got PSV at home, played them in the Europa League last season, beat them at home, lost away. You've got Spurs at home on the Sunday, North London derby. What's your take? What do you think, though? How do you think those games will go?
I mean, as you said, we've had a generous draw in the Champions League. We characterised it as a Europa League group. So I think from that perspective, we should beat PSV. I wouldn't be surprised if we drew with them or if it was a narrow victory. We should really batter them. But again, I think last season we were supposed to batter them too, and we didn't really do that on both legs either. So I think from that perspective, I think we'll get a narrow victory against PSV. And then for the Arsenal Spurs, the North London derby, I have a bad feeling. And the fact that they come back from that bloody, potential loss against, was it against Sheffield, right? Against Sheffield United. bloody hell, there's something in the water over there, man, and I'm not looking forward to that game because we've looked shaky and they've looked not clinical. They haven't been like dominating every single match, but they look like they've got a clutch gene about them. They're looking very kind of Tom Brady-ish, Cristiano Ronaldo type at the moment, where it doesn't matter how badly they play, they're somehow going to get a win. And I think riding that high and just riding the high that I know is going around Spurs' fans kind of fan base right now, I feel like they're going to come prepared to that game. Even if it's Arsenal at home, they're going to be singing their hearts out and just going to play real attacking football. We haven't looked super solid at the back, and it depends really heavily on if Partey comes back by then and if he decides to stick him at right back again, which if he does, then I can see us letting in at least 2 goals. But if we start with the same kind of lineup as last week and, we are coming off of a win against PSV, I can see us winning it. But I don't want to sit on the fence. I'm just going to say I think it's going to be a draw. I think it'll be a 2-2 draw, a thriller. And I don't think Arsenal will dominate that game as much as I would love them to. I think Spurs are a higher caliber in terms of that attacking threat going forward than the teams that we've played so far. And I think they will punish us. If Fulham can get a couple goals against us, I dread to think what bloody Maddison, Son and all of them are going to do to us.
Yeah, I think we've kind of weirdly got the opposite way round, haven't we, for the next couple of fixtures? We've kind of got the bigger Champions League game. You've got the bigger Premier League game on the weekend. But I think you'll fare much better off in your bigger clash. I think you'll beat Spurs, but I think it will be a real good game. And I think they'll give it you just as much as you're going to give it them. I think, Arsenal and Spurs are set up now to like similar way, I guess, that you were in the seasons gone by, where that home crowd and the home leg of your double header in the season is going to have such a huge impact on the result. And I think it will be that slim of a margin that if you do win, it will be because of that crowd lifting you. Because to be honest, Arsenal United was the same thing. The crowd did in those final 10 minutes or so added time really push you over the line. There wasn't a huge difference, I think, on the day. And I think you'll probably have a similar result against Spurs. But I think it's going to be great, man. I'm going to be primed to watch that on Sunday afternoon. I think it'll be a great game. And I think it'll at least be entertaining. I think it'll be more entertaining than the Arsenal United game because of the way Spurs play. And I think you guys will rise to the occasion. So I'm looking forward to it, man. We got a good week of football. It's always nice to see the Champions League come back, even if we're due to get a slapping.
It is, and I'm hoping that we'll see Newcastle get a slapping today. But anyway, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Obviously, it's another sore week for Ants and the United fans. So hopefully, well, actually not hopefully, but I'm sure you're hoping that the episodes will start to be a bit more positive for you. And you might be able to get some revenge on us next week, depending on that result against Spurs. So we'll see you guys next week. Obviously, as always, if you're watching on YouTube, a big thank you for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel if you can, like the video, share it, comment down below with any kind of questions or comments that you think around some of the topics that we discussed today. And for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other podcasting platform, as always, please follow. Again, thank you for listening and give us a 5-star review if you can. It does really, really help in terms of our kind of rankings and getting more eyes on the pod. So just a big thank you again to everyone, and big thank you to you, Ants. I'm looking forward to seeing you against Bayern tomorrow, mate.
Yeah, I think I'm due to get a salary for this podcast. It's feeling very workish. Not happy to turn up, just kind of being there because you have to be. But yeah, let's hope the results and the performances turn around for us, because otherwise, I might need to make this an Arsenal podcast and let one of your mates come on and take my place.
Might have to get a Tottenham fan on it and make it a different kind of social media derby. All right.
Wrap
Cheers,
it up,
everyone.
Wrap it up.
See you next week.
See you, mate.